On this episode, we visit Frederick, Maryland, where a new tunnel unites the trail system. Community support is vital to local trails and parks. Snow removal from sidewalks is a problem along state highways in Maryland. Finally, we look at crossing the street in Washington and Beirut. Stay tuned.
We're in Frederick, Maryland, talking with Tim Davis, who's a transportation planner with the city. What's this right behind us?
Well, this is a main connection for the city's shared use path system. It's a tunnel, and it goes under the southbound ramps of US 15 here at Rosemont Avenue, and it connects about 2 miles of trails going into downtown that way to about 3 miles of trails going out to the west side of town that way.
Why is it important to have a tunnel to make that connection?
Well, for pedestrian safety and bicycle safety mostly, because this is a very busy traffic area, and it made sense for us to make this a grade-separated connection. And it allows people to never have to ride on any roads. And as many of us know, not everyone likes to ride on the roads. So we've provided a facility where everybody can walk safely and ride safely.
What sort of disruption was there to the traffic on this pretty busy on-ramp to get the tunnel in?
Well, we were very fortunate with our contractor. Initially, it was going to take 3 weeks of lane closures for this particular tunnel to be installed, but they changed their mind and found a way to save and actually did it in less than a weekend. They started at 11 o'clock on Friday night and were done by 11 o'clock Sunday morning.
What are the advantages when you can do minimize disruption with a project like this?
Well, one of the main advantages is during the week, these ramps here take probably upwards of 40,000 cars a day. So you're lessening the disruption to the general public in big numbers. So we were very proud that we were able to do that over the weekend, where, of course, the traffic's less to begin with. But we also didn't disrupt our major employer, Fort Detrick, which is right over there. This is also a major access point to Hood College and the hospital. So we didn't disrupt the major employers, and we made it for a pretty quick run.
With that many cars every day, I can see why a tunnel was important. What's the response been from the community? Do people like it?
I have not heard but a single complaint. It has been terrific. I have people telling me every week how much they like it and how much they use it and how happy they are that it's here. And we have a large advocacy group over at Baker Park and as well as one here at Waterford Park, and they were very supportive, as were our elected officials and our neighborhood advisory councils. It's been nothing but good news for this.
And you see a lot of people that might have been just using the one park or the other park now taking advantage of the connection?
Absolutely. I've recently done an origin and destination survey for this particular tunnel, and we have people going through there that are coming from, for instance, Walkersville, New Market, Gaithersburg, Berkeley Springs. So people are using it from all over. As far as the numbers are concerned, we've had upwards of 70 people an hour coming through this tunnel on a nice Saturday weekend.
What sort of advice would you have to a transportation planner from another city, working on their bike trail system? What could you tell them?
Well, one of the best carrots, unfortunately, one of the best carrots is to have some funding. We were fortunate enough with this project to fund about $60,000 of the design for it and about $275,000 of the construction through the Maryland State Bikeways program. So that sort of thing is really integral to putting your project together, that you can find other sources than just local funding, and that made this a lot easier to get through.
We're talking with Kelly Russell, who's an alderman for the city of Frederick. Where are we sitting right now?
We are sitting in beautiful Waterford Park in the city of Frederick, Maryland. Waterford Park is one side of the connection that we were talking about. On the other side is Baker Park. Baker Park is very well known in the city of Frederick. We have a lot of events there. Waterford Park, on the other hand, has been sort of a well-kept secret because there really hasn't been direct access to it until this connection. And what we have here is a passive park and a very active Friends of Waterford Park group who volunteer and have planted trees, identified trees, built pathways, and really taken a lot of care to make this a beautiful passive park and sort of an oasis in the city. You wouldn't know that you're in the city.
How important are little volunteer neighborhood groups like that to the quality of life in a place like Frederick?
Absolutely critical, and we have an amazing community of volunteers. We have what they call them Friends of groups for different parks. They range in membership from just a few to hundreds, and have participated in projects such as supporting this and providing community input, but then also just the volunteer hours and love that they give to care for the projects that they have volunteered for. Really just makes all the difference in the world. The city couldn't possibly do the amount of work that our volunteers do. We're very, very grateful for them.
And do you find that more people in the rest of the city are becoming aware of this park, now you have the connection?
Absolutely. I speak to people almost on a daily basis who say, I've gone through the tunnel, it is so cool, I didn't even know that Waterford Park was over there, I didn't know it had a name. So it's really started to connect people in a way that wasn't possible before. This is, it's with a highway that bisects your city right through the middle. It really does create not only a physical barrier, but almost a social barrier, saying the east side and the west side. And now there's a way to connect all of that. So it's been a great social connector as well.
Where do trails like this fit into your broader plans for pedestrians and bicyclists in the city?
Well, the city for a long time has had this shared use path plan, and we're seeing it come to fruition partially with projects funded by the city, and then developments as they come in are also required to build their portions of it. So the idea really long term is that we become a more connected and walkable and bikeable city. We do have a bronze level certification from the League of American Bicyclists as a bicycle friendly community. We're working on getting walk friendlier. And all of these things really make the city of Frederick attractive to people to want to live, work, play, stay, and connect, which is, the goal is that we want to have a city that you don't have to get in a car to go somewhere, that you can, that you'll know your neighbors, that we establish ourselves and have a really strong sense of place.
Now, when the city's talking with a business that's thinking of maybe moving here, do they talk to them about your pass system and how it's expanding? And
Absolutely. Of course, one of the gems that we have in the city of Frederick is the Carroll Creek project, which we just finished. It's a multi-million-dollar project and a flood control project through the center of the city. And that connects here. And what we're hearing from employers is that the ability to tell people that, you can recreate here in the city of Frederick, you can get to the mountains and to downtown simply by getting on a bike or even walking. These are things that are really attractive to businesses and the millennials that are coming in. They want to be able to get places and connect along the way. So it's been a great boon to our economic development as well.
If I were to come back to Frederick in 10 years, what would you like to be able to show me?
I would like to be able to show you that the entire shared use path plan has been brought to fruition, that you would sit here on any given day of the week and see all kinds of people going by, dogs going by, and more of the mixed use kinds of development that we're encouraging, where you have live workplace in the same kind of in the same areas, so that you don't need to drive down the road. This would be a place that is, we like to say we're hip and historic, and we're getting hipper every day. So it's a place where we're trying to attract people to come, work, live, stay, and play.
We're in Silver Spring, Maryland, talking with Michael Jackson, who's a bicycle and pedestrian safety expert. What's this road we're along here?
Good morning, John. This is Colesville Road, US 29 in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Now, what's the history of the sidewalk next to us here?
The sidewalk has been a godsend. US 29 had a gap between Four Corners and Burnt Mills, and we're on a very steep hill. There's a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit, and there were no sidewalks on either side. So it's truly a peril for pedestrians until the state and Montgomery County got together and built a sidewalk along here. It was very expensive, but it's a critical link along this busy corridor for pedestrians and bicyclists.
What happened to this sidewalk last winter when we got the big snowstorm everyone talks about?
Oh God, another peril for pedestrians. Well, this is a prime example of our policies regarding removal of snow on sidewalks. I was traveling along here on my bicycle on the sidewalk, and this was about a week after the last snow. All the snow had melted from the roadways. The snow was even melted from the grassy areas. However, at one of the curb cuts, there was about a 3-foot high pile of frozen snow and ice left over from when the snow plows dumped it, and it was blocking the sidewalk, blocking access to the bus stop. For an able-bodied person like myself, or temporarily able-bodied, I can walk around it. However, if I was disabled, it would be a problem. Typically, sidewalks are supposed to be the responsibility along state highways of the political jurisdiction. State Highway Administration does not maintain sidewalks. So the political subdivision, in this case Montgomery County, puts the responsibility on the adjacent property owners to remove the snow. Now, what happens when the adjacent property is an open lot like we have here? There is no address that's visible, so who removes the snow? Mother Nature. God put it here, and God will remove it. We have to do better than this as a society.
And that's a problem here. As we go farther down Colesville Road here, are there other places where it's a problem?
Yes. So Montgomery County policy is that the adjacent property owners have to remove the snow. State law says that the State Highway Administration does not maintain sidewalks on state highways. What happens when the adjacent property owner is the State Highway Administration? Further up the road, US 29 crosses the Capitol Beltway. The sidewalks feed into Montgomery Blair High School and are used by students. So if the adjacent property owner is the State Highway Administration and state law prohibits them from removing snow, what happens? I guess the students just have to walk out in traffic. Pedestrian safety is one of the priority areas of Maryland's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. But we know that walking on streets in snow conditions because the sidewalks are unplowed can be a serious and sometimes fatal hazard to pedestrians. I think we need to do better than the current policies that we have here. Also, county policy says that if the snow plows dump snow onto the sidewalks, it's the responsibility of the adjacent property owner to clear the snow. So if you've already cleared the snow and a snow plow dumps the snow thicker and heavier than what nature put down, then you have to go out and replow it upon pain of getting a fine for doing so. I think most citizens are not equipped to remove that type of snow that front end loaders can dump on sidewalks.
So you have a 6-lane road here, so 3 lanes are going to be dumped on top of, and So even in a relatively small snowstorm, 4 inches, 6 inches, much less the 2 feet we got last winter, 4 inches of snow off of 3 lanes of road, that's going to be quite a burden on someone.
Absolutely. And it seems like it's a violation of federal law of the ADA.
Yeah.
There's a requirement that you maintain facilities. We have wonderful tactile strips on the curb cut ramps. So someone who has low vision or is legally blind, they can detect that they're going to walk out onto a street. Now, if it's covered with snow, you lose that ability. And if it's covered with snow, how can they get around, or if there's a wheelchair? So if you have snow that's still here a week after the snowstorm, to me, that seems to be a violation of the intent of maintenance of accessible facilities that the ADA requires.
And, apart from the legal aspect, if you're someone in a wheelchair trying to get to the bus stop, your boss probably doesn't want you to miss a week of work, 2 weeks of work every time there's a major snowstorm.
Absolutely. Right now, Metro is having problems with maintaining the rail lines and spending a lot of money in that. One of the biggest, the heaviest cost factors is having the accessible service where an individual van picks up persons who are disabled to take them around. When you have uncleared sidewalks, you're probably creating more demand for this type of service, where someone who is disabled could use the sidewalks, but because they're blocked, now has to call for the accessible van service to take them around. So we may be saving money on not having the state or the county government clear the sidewalks on one hand, but that budget is coming about on another hand. And what about the health risks of people who get heart attacks from shoveling snow on the ground? Those factors have to be taken in consideration as well. Other communities have done a better job of addressing these issues, and I think that the state and county legislators owe it to their constituents to look at some type of study to see if there's a better way of removing snow from sidewalks than we currently have.
We're in Washington, D.C., talking with Rowan Itani.
Hello.
What are your issues as a pedestrian here in Washington?
Well, there are various problems. I've been living in the district for 20 years, and I don't know if it's gotten worse or better, but one of the things that's challenging is that sometimes when you're trying to cross the street, you find the cars that are making a right turn, they pretend it's their right of way. So you end up with this tension between, do we go even though we have the walk sign, or do we let that car go? And sometimes the cars they'll be pretty aggressive, and they'll be trying to make the turn. And I've had situations where I pointed to the signals, showing them that, look, it's my right of way. And they'll either be upset, they'll flip it or honk, or like literally just wait for me feet after I start crossing, and then they just go very fast. So that's one situation that seems to happen over and over. And often right here, this is a perfect intersection, because the cars will come from the street and will try to make a right turn and go up. And I'm often crossing this part, so it ends up being a challenge.
So the intersection itself, it's got the little green man telling you can walk, marked crosswalk, pretty well marked crosswalk. Everything's there, but the drivers just misbehave.
Yes. I live in this building and I take the bus often to go to work or so on from the bus stop is right there. And this is another challenge, which is, some of us who live in the neighborhood, we're trying to make it to the bus stop to catch the bus on time. And sometimes we see the bus coming from up the street and you're standing here and you don't want to miss the bus. So sometimes you really want to cross fast. And then we have to look at the lights, and if we miss the light, then you have to wait for another 50 seconds or so. So that's another challenge about, do we run even if it's a green light? Or do we wait and miss the bus and then have to wait another 15, 20 minutes and be late to work? So that's also a challenge. I'll talk about another similar along those same lines. There is a bus that comes up this street. And a lot of people get off that bus, cross this side street to take the bus going down Wisconsin Avenue. And there's always that same problem of, do we cross even if it's coming down to 5 seconds left to cross the street? Do we run? Do we make a group? Or do we miss the bus, which is really not fun for a pedestrian, for someone taking public transportation.
How long the wait is the wait if you miss your bus?
Sometimes it could be 15 to 20 minutes. Depends on the time of day. And even if it's just 10, 15, if you're trying to make it to work and you're cutting it really close, then that's a big of a deal, because you'll be 15 minutes late to your job and you don't want to do that. So, and if it's very cold or very hot or something about the weather, you also don't want to miss. So that 15 minutes is a big deal. And so I've actually taken the risk of running through the street, even though I consider it a larger street for DC. And I don't think it's a good idea to be crossing it. Usually if I have other friends, I tell them, do not jaywalk on this street, do not cross it unless you have the light. But there's been a few situations where I was so gung-ho on getting on that bus and not wanting to miss it. Sometimes I've missed the one before or what have you, and I've run across a few times, and sometimes the cars coming are honking, or I just take the risk.
So sometimes the pedestrians are a little bit naughty too.
Of course, yeah. And here's the bus now turning, and I'm looking at, this is exactly one of the buses that some people get off the side and go to take this other bus going down the street, and then you also have the issue of some buses are full, so you want to get on the bus that that has actual seats where you can sit down. There is also an express bus that I like to take very often, and that express bus only runs during rush hour and runs every almost 20 minutes. So if you miss it, it's really longer. So that one I really don't want to miss. And this is usually that's the one that I will run across the street for, because I don't want to miss it. And sometimes also I've developed bus buddies on that 37 bus. So I know that I have to be on that specific time at that bus to see my buddies. So I don't want to miss it.
How about farther down the hill here? What are some of the other intersections like?
So about a block down, there used to be an intersection that would have a diagonal shape, where the street coming off of Wisconsin is diagonal. And there were a lot of problems there, because cars would swirl, and other cars coming from Wisconsin would try to make a turn right into that diagonal street, and you're trying to cross it. So they've tried over the years so many different ways, and finally now the city, if we walk there, it's changed. They've actually constructed an actual triangular built-in construction and changed the way the road goes. So now you're forced to follow the road, and I think that's made it a lot safer.
So there are things the city can do to improve some of these locations.
Absolutely. If the city has heard a lot of complaints from residents and sees a lot of accidents happening on the intersections, I've noticed over the years that there's been changes with adding stop signs, stoplights, or constructing an actual physical barrier to change or to tell the cars to go one way. There's also these yellow signs for yielding for pedestrians.
How does being a pedestrian in Washington compare with other places you've lived?
Well, I'm originally from Beirut, Lebanon, and Beirut is a crowded city, but it's a very walkable city. To me, in a way, New York reminds me of Beirut, like the old streets of New York. And people jaywalk all the time, even though there are more cars. And the structure for the traffic in terms of being organized is a mess. So drivers don't obey the rules, and it's just a mishmash. However, there's the synergy between drivers and pedestrians, because the drivers expect that there would be a pedestrian coming left or right at any moment in any different direction, or running with the kid, like a mom with a kid or so on, or an elderly, that the drivers are maybe more vigilant, hyper vigilant possibly, looking everywhere all the time, which I would guess it makes for drivers it's a much harder job to do. But the pedestrians feel more, we have more rights, or maybe not rights is not the right word, but the pedestrian feels that they're empowered to cross or stop the car or run through, and it just allows you that freedom. And I think from that experience growing up in Beirut, being able to cross the roads, jaywalking and at any point in the street, it's made it very easy for me to adapt here to Washington, because it's also sort of a walking city. And I do find myself, I have to admit, that I'm jaywalking on narrower streets. But on larger streets like this one, I feel a little bit more nervous, because especially by an intersection where cars could be coming from different directions, and sometimes they come fast and they just turn around.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.